Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Gareth from Simple Studios, the only game studio dedicated to your success, and in this episode we're going to be making some enemy adjustments, we're going to be making some weapons, some more art, and a pause system. Super awesome, and let's get into it. Alrighty, so as you guys can see on this super awesome plan here, we've got a few things on the menu today. First up, we're going to be tackling the pause system, because, we can't really have a game without a pause system now, can we? Then we're going to be fixing up the charger from last episode, which if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's an awesome little episode where we make my favorite enemy in the game thus far, and I think you'd really enjoy it. And then finally, we've got a couple new weapons. Now, unfortunately, because of time, we're only going to be making one of these weapons, but arguably it's the better weapons. And actually, really quickly, before we start, as is tradition with all these awesome videos, we're going to be kicking off what tools we're going to be using. As you can see here, we've got ChatGPT. It's a classic. You should use it. I use it. Everyone should use it. It's great. Wonderful tool. Next up, we've got GIMP. It's just a better Photoshop. Nothing else to say there. If you are using Photoshop, just stop, man. Save yourself the $7 grand a month and just use GIMP. Absolutely amazing. Couldn't recommend it anymore. Next up, we've got good music. You guys already know I've got the best taste in music by a long shot. So if you guys want my super awesome coding playlist, let me know. Next up, we've got creativity. You can't do any games without creativity, so make games. Even if you only got a little bit of creativity, it doesn't matter. Get your awesome ideas out there and make people play a good game and make the game well. And then finally, we've got Unity, specifically version 2021.1.0 F1. I use it because ChatGPT is compatible with it, and if you are going to be following along here, which honestly I think you should, then you're going to need that version as well. So without further ado, let's dive into the video, specifically the pause system first. Okay, now that we're looking at the pause system, let's actually figure out what it does. And it may seem very simple on paper, but there's a couple other complexities here. So obviously the game pauses, meaning that the player can't move, the enemies can't move, the enemies don't animate, the player doesn't take damage, blah 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 blah. You get the idea, right? But it's not that simple, because we have a lot of enemy animations, and we also have different states with the enemies, like the charger. He's got his regular moving state, he has his charging state, and he has his during charge state. And all three of those states require him to constantly be moving. So the pause system, obviously I'll dive into this a little bit more in a little bit, but we have to consider quite a lot when actually making the pause system, because if the pause system doesn't stop the enemy states or it resets the enemy states, then essentially the player is able to spam the pause and unpause button to essentially make enemies completely useless, and that's exactly what we want to avoid. And here we'll dig into it. Actually, I might screen record some of the Unity script with some comments I left in there. I'm not too sure yet, but thankfully the Unity pause system does seem to be good enough. Unfortunately, we can't really have any fancy UI stuff, like when you hover over a button with your mouse, it doesn't change the sprite. I'm not too sure how to fix that, but honestly, I think it should be okay, because this does look more scuffed if it doesn't change, so we might just keep it the way it is. Now, heading on to the charger, so obviously we gotta fix it, because last episode we added it in there, we got the super awesome sprites in, but it didn't really work as intended. It kind of just stood there, and even when it was charging, it moved at about a snail's pace at best. So fixing it took a little bit of doing, and trust me, it took a lot of doing. And again, I'm really sorry, because I meant to actually record my process and the updates, but I didn't record. So you'll have to imagine what's going on, and I'll try and draw it out here, probably on a post-it note to my right, just so that you guys can see what's happening, or at least what was happening, because thankfully I did fix it. And essentially what was happening in the old version is the script was applying force based on time. It sounds like something out of Star Wars, but let me break it down. So basically what happened is it took the total distance, which was based off of a charge distance, say 5 units, 10 units, whatever, and then it figured out the charge speed, in this case was 8, and then it figured out how fast the charger would move in this distance within a single frame. So moving at 8 speed per second, how fast could it move from the minimum, where it started, and the maximum of this distance within one frame. So the reason it looked slow is because it wasn't really moving. It only moved one frame. The reason why it charged right back up after it finished its charge is because its charge was teeny tiny when it was supposed to be the full length. And yeah, it just never worked. So essentially what we did to fix it is there's a couple moving parts here, and I'll try to describe them without going overboard here. But now what it does is it applies force to the rigid body, which is a component on the actual enemy itself, and then it pushes it along based on charge speed. So when the player's moving around, it will target the player's direction, say a 45-degree angle from where it's at right now. Once it has that direction locked, it will no longer target the player, and it will start to it will start to charge. It takes a look at the charge speed and the destination point and pushes it along this it pushes it along this predetermined path or angle, whatever you want to call it, until it reaches the destination point. And we also added in a cooldown so that it doesn't constantly charge, and it's also because without the cooldown, when it finished the charge, the player would obviously still be in the range because the charger was so fast, or it still is so fast, to the point where it would just frequently charge, and it didn't really feel good to play against. It didn't really... I mean, sure, it was exciting for a little bit, but it got pretty boring afterwards, and I can only imagine what it's going to be like when there's multiple chargers and multiple enemies around you that are constantly trying to kill you. So we added a cooldown of 1.5 seconds, so after it finishes charging, it will not charge for 1.5 seconds, which gives you some time to move around, actually breathe. And the charger is very slow on its own, but when it's charging, it's fast, so you're able to really focus it down and take advantage of it while it's not charging. And that's pretty much it. It works perfectly now. I believe I'll have some gameplay down below of me testing it out and having a lot of success with it. It's pretty easy to counter in my opinion, but this is if you are a god gamer like myself. Anyone with less experience than me is probably going to have a tough time against the charger, but I'm sure you guys would have no problem with it. And finally, the new metal pipe. So this one, again, we wanted to do 2 weapons here, but I think I'm running out of time, so we're just going to stick with 1 metal pipe here. And essentially what it does is it creates a circle around the player, and whenever the cooldown hits 0, it targets up to 3 random enemies within this range, and then drops a metal pipe on them after a delay. Now, the delay is actually a time for the script to actually gather their positions, get the sound ready, and get the damage function ready, because the way it works is, prior to me having it this way, essentially what happened is it just instantiated 3 metal pipes above enemies and dropped them, and what this did is enemies were able to dodge the pipes, and if the pipes hit multiple enemies, which more often than not they did, if they didn't miss, it played the sound a lot. So it was very loud, and I did not record this part because quite frankly, it was blowing my ears out. So I had to change it to this way, to where the pipe script itself played the sound instead of the projectiles, because this way, whenever the pipes land or whenever the function is triggered, it will play the sound. Meaning that it only plays once instead of 500 times, which is a lot easier on the ears, and I will shut up now so that you can listen to it. And obviously, as is with everything in coding, this did not come first try. The metal pipe actually went through a surprising amount of variations before I got to this final product. I did not record it because it was extremely loud, and I did not want to edit the extremely loud clips. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll post... No, I won't post that, actually. But essentially what happened is, prior to getting this final result, when the pipes were dropped, they used to lock onto the enemies, and when they did, they would collide with the enemies, but the issue is that they collided multiple times. So this means, instead of only dealing 25 damage, they would deal hundreds of damage, literally, because they would constantly collide with the enemies, and they were not being destroyed. And as you could see, as you could see with the gameplay, when the pipes hit the enemies, they're supposed to get destroyed, and the last iteration was not destroying them. So essentially what happened is, I forgot to add the logic where, when it collided with an enemy, the pipe projectile got destroyed. So, I was confused as to why it wasn't being destroyed, but in reality, I just didn't tell it to get destroyed. So, after that massive realization, we eventually got to the final product, and essentially, the only change that we made after that was taking the sound effect away from the pipe projectiles and putting it onto the pipe script itself so that the pipe sound didn't play 6,000 times. And now that we've covered the metal pipe, that's actually going to be it for this episode. I want to keep it short, I want to keep them informative. I'm trying a new format here, so let me know if it's better than the other formats, or if I should maybe stick to the formats that I used for my previous videos. But regardless, that's all for this video, and let's get a sneak peek at the next video coming up. We're going to be making more weapons, because I like to kill enemies, you guys like to kill enemies, and if you are enemies, you're going to be getting slaughtered next episode, so look out. I've got some new memes in mind for what I'm going to make new weapons, so definitely stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you very much for watching this episode, and I hope to see you in the next one.